Closing arguments come to the table and the jury goes in to deliberate in the Rittenhouse trial. So we will talk a bit about that, including the prosecutor's amazing lack of trigger discipline. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be something to see here. In other news, Joe Biden has signed the infrastructure deal, which means brrr. So we'll talk a bit about what's going on with that. In other Biden news, Xi Jinping and Joe Biden are meeting virtually, I believe, today. So we'll talk a bit about what's going on with that. And Russians shoot a satellite out of the sky. So we'll go over what that means internationally and what they're claiming and what the news media is claiming about that as well. It is going to be all this and more. Let's go, Brandon. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good morning, Edheads. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar, and excuse me, I might have a little bit of a cold from running around outside in a sweatshirt without a coat on. But it's what I had to do. I had to go down and figure out what's going on in Kenosha, and well, here we are. So if I do have to clear my throat a little bit, I apologize for that. But we have got a bunch of stuff to go over here today, including some of the closing arguments. And I'll talk just a bit about some of the stuff that we talked about while I was on stream last night. That was, not on stream last night, yesterday afternoon. That was a little bit of fun walking around there seeing, the mainstream media is trying to tell you there's going to be all these riots and protests. And the National Guard is coming out and everything else is going to be out like that. But realistically, I'm looking at this and if this is what they have out here now during the trial, I'm not anticipating a lot of shenanigans if they don't get the verdict that they want, but I don't know. We're going to have to see. I have no crystal ball. I don't practice Santeria or anything else like that, so we'll have to figure that out as it goes along here. So let's get into it, but before we get started, do make sure you guys go and check out the website, turnsofepagesproductions.com. Go and check us out over there. We are getting ready to launch still. We are still trying to raise up some money to make sure that the wonderful Bobby Joe goes and gets paid. Bobby Joe is a great asset to this, and she does very, very good work on websites, but, she comes with the price tag. So if you want the best, you have to pay for the best. So do make sure you guys go over there and check that out, and also make sure you check out The Porch Boys, The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, who will be coming back. He launched his I'm Coming Back video yesterday. I haven't watched it yet, but it showed up in my news feed, so go and check that out. And also The Breakdown with Birkenhoff. Go check out all those shows, and if you guys do want to donate, we do have the GoFundMe up there, up to $600 out of our $1,200 goal. So go and check that out. That's going to be, it's for the people, by the people. And if you do donate to this, we can make sure that we get your name, if you're not anonymous, up on the screen on a special thank you page at the start of the screen. All right, let's look at finance here before we get into the big Rittenhouse news of the day. Starting with the Dow. The Dow looks like it tumbled after the infrastructure bill was signed here. So maybe there are some inflationary concerns that are coming with this that are rattling out the markets. It did go up throughout the beginning of the day and then just kind of dropped as it went. And we also have consumer prices and retail sales data coming out today. So that's going to be another thing that either weighs on the market or boosts it back up. So we will see what happens with that and where this goes. Previous close was down 0.036%, so barely a drop at 36,087.45. Looking at your Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin had a very significant drop yesterday as well. 60,000, 69 US dollars and 50 US cents over yesterday, 65,000 US dollars. So I don't know if people are just getting ready to go start paying for their Thanksgiving dinner, if they're getting ready to go out and start paying for their Christmas gifts, but it looks like there is a big sell-off on the Bitcoin. Something to watch there as we go. Looking at scrap metal. Your copper is up Your steel is up and your aluminum is down. Looking at your individuals, bare wire is down. Almost all your copper plays are up, rather. Romex wire is down, however. BX steel down. Brass is down. Brass shells are up. Light iron is down. Number one steel is down. Cast iron is up. Rotors are up. Complete car is up. Stainless steel is down. Stainless steel is almost worthless at this point. It's showing 0 cents per pound. So that's got to be a hard one off of this. Looking at aluminum, siding is down. Aluminum copper fin is up. Radiators are up. Aluminum cans are coming back up at this point. Sheet aluminum is up. Aluminum rims are up. Other plays, motors are down. Ballasts are up. Lead is up. Batteries are down. All of your catalytic converters are up, which means those orders for cars are coming in. That might buoy the economy back up as we see the chip shortage come to an end. So, hey, if they need cats and the materials from cats, then they're building cars for something. All right, let's look in and see what IBD has to say for the morning. Extend your access to IBD Digital. No, I'm not going to pay for IBD. I'm just going to use the articles they put up in front here. Dow futures rise as Biden, Xi meet. Elon Musk sells more Tesla stock, and that's going to be another big weigh on this because Tesla is on all 3 indices. From Scott Latonin, Dow Jones futures were slightly higher early Tuesday as President Biden met virtually with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Tesla stock continued its recent fall while Rivian extended its torrid run, and Lucid Motors jumped on earnings results late, while Home Depot and Walmart reported ahead of Tuesday's opening. On Monday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average moved down less than 0.1%. The S&P 500 inched lower, while the Nasdaq eased less than 0.1% lower. Among the Dow Jones leaders, Apple rose a fraction on Monday, and Microsoft lost 0.2% in today's stock market. American Express, JP Morgan Chase, and Nike continued to trade near a buy point in this current rally. Home Depot and Walmart posted results Tuesday morning, kicking off a week full of retail earnings. Among the EV leaders, Tesla declined 1.9% on Monday, while Rivian surged nearly 15%. Lucid Motors reported Monday night, and XPeng is near a buy point. Among the top stocks to buy and watch, Alphabet, On Holding, and Shopify are in or near buy zones. Microsoft, On Holding, and Tesla are IBD leaderboard stocks. XPeng Motors was featured in this week's Stocks Near a Buy Zone story, and Alphabet was featured in Friday's IBD Sector Leaders story. Yes, Google, that controls everything, from the operating system on 70% of the phones on the market, to self-driving cars, to computer systems, to Chromebooks, to your search results, to everything else in the world. Yeah, they're up on top on a Sector Leaders story. Surprise, surprise. I'm still waiting to see what happens with Rivian, though, because I don't know if it's going to be a flash in the pan because everybody's buying all the vans at once, or the trucks and cars because Amazon's got the huge order, or if they're actually going to have some real staying power. I'm very curious about that. That actually kind of piques my interest. And not only even a little bit because Ford is involved. But we'll see what happens off of that. Let's grab one from Barron's, and then we will get into some of the big news of the day. Dow rises, bond yields hold higher, Tesla falls, and what else is happening in the stock market today? From Jack Denton. The stock market was rising Tuesday as bond yields held firm at recently elevated levels, with investors looking ahead to retail sales that could feed further into concerns about inflation. Futures for the Dow Jones Industrial Average indicated an open about 40 points higher after the index declined 12 points on Monday to close at 3687. Futures for the S&P 500 signaled a smart start. Overseas, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index rose 1.3%, while in London, the FTSE 100 underperformed its continental European peers, rising about 0.2%. The pound strengthened 0.3% against the dollar, and that's more fish for you because there you go, you can get £1 fish. Come on, ladies, come on, ladies. Hitting the large UK-listed multinationals after the British unemployment rate fell more than expected. The great force capturing investor attention continues to be inflation and the debate over whether rising prices are transitory or more long-lasting. U.S. October retail sales data later in the day are expected to feed this debate, with expectations for year-over-year growth of 1.5%, up from 0.7% in September. A strong reading could stoke fears of more persistent inflation and rise the prospect of a rate increase by the Federal Reserve sooner rather than later, which will affect your home buying price if you decide to go out and buy a home, and the rate that you can go and get for a mortgage, and whether or not BlackRock is going to come in and buy everything else up off of this here. So it's this rate hike that's coming. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to watch, and that's where I think the economy might come to this getting halt under the Biden administration, because they can go pump bunny money into this until the cows come home, but it's what the Fed does. And where that affects the consumer buying power, that's what we need to come back and watch. Today's main risk event and potential market shaker will be the U.S. retail sales data for October, said Lukman Otunga, an analyst broker at FXTM. A report that meets or exceeds market expectations may fuel expectations over the Federal Reserve raising interest rates sooner than expected, Otunga said. Traders are currently pricing in a 43% probability of at least one rate hike by early May 2020 and an 82% probability by mid-June next year. It will be interesting to see whether a robust retail sales report boosts the odds of a rate hike in May. Also adding weight to the stocks were bond yields, which remain elevated from recent levels, with the yield on the benchmark 10-year Treasury note holding firm at 1.6%. Higher bond yields tend to discount the present value of future profits, pressuring stock valuations. So, that's where we have coming in out of this. That's what we have. That's what we see coming from this. Let's get into the big news of the day. And even before we get into the Rittenhouse thing, we've got a little bit of breaking news from yesterday that we will have to pay attention to in the days that come here. And why is it always Colorado, by the way? Dude, I know you guys have legal weed out there, so you should probably be a little bit calmer than this, but what the fuck, Colorado? Seriously. And it's Aurora, too, so it's Denver area. Again, it's always Aurora. 16 shot near Aurora High School. From 9 News NBC. From Troy Pope. 16s were shot in a park near a high school in Aurora on Monday, the Aurora Police Department said. The shooting happened around 12:45 p.m. at Nome Park near Nome Street and 12th Avenue, according to APD. 5 of the teens were taken to hospitals and one took himself to the hospital. Police said one of the 6 was taken into emergency surgery. I need us all to be outraged about what happened here today, Aurora Police Chief Vanessa Wilson said, while asking for the public's help in locating the suspects involved. Let's listen.
What are the public?
No, that's a 10-minute video. We're not going to listen to that whole thing. Wilson asked residents with photos or videos or information to come forward so they can find the suspects involved. She said the shooting may have been a drive-by and there may have been suspects on foot. The chief said multiple calibers of weapon were used in the shooting. Henry Martin, who lives across the street from the park, said he heard at least 30 gunshots. I'm a little shook about this, Martinez said. It's scary hearing that many gunshots going off right in front of your house. The first responders on the scene were school resource officers who Wilson said provided life-saving measures. The police department said responding officers applied tourniquets to at least 2 victims. There's a Penske truck sitting out, or just pulled in, to the parking lot in this little building here. That's weird. I don't know why there's a commercial vehicle sitting out here. There's an Amazon package I'm waiting for. I don't know if that's what he's coming here for. There's a Penske truck here. That is curious. And he's pulling tires out. Well, now I have questions. I guess that'll be a developing story for the day. All the victims are students at Aurora Central. Their names are not being released, but police identified them as a 14-year-old boy, a 15-year-old girl, a 16-year-old boy, a 16-year-old girl, and a 17-year-old boy and an 18-year-old man. UC Health said they received 2 of the patients, but did not provide their ages or conditions. Children's Hospital of Colorado said they received 3 of the patients from shooting scene, and they've been reunited with their families. Ah, they're taking that fridge that they replaced upstairs. That's what they're doing. It always makes you a little bit nervous when a random commercial vehicle comes rolling up behind your house. Let's see. Police said the 18-year-old took himself to the hospital. He had minor injuries, according to police. The police department said Aurora Central High School, which is across the street from Nome Park, was on a secure perimeter. The shooting did not happen on school grounds. The high school will be open on a regular schedule Tuesday, but there will be extra security. Aurora Public Schools said they will provide mental health professionals to ensure students have the resources they need to try to make sense of what happened. So, a few things to think about with it. First off, like I said at the top of the story, what the fuck, Colorado? And it is always the Denver area. It is always this area. What is going on? What's the problem? Do we need to send counselors out there? Do we need to, evacuate some of our friends? Freckled Liberty, come east, Freckled Liberty. I know that she's in that area. I don't know where in that area she is, but I know she's somewhere remote to that area somewhere. So, let's get some of these people that we like out of there and, figure out what's happening. I don't want to see anybody that I care about in the crossfire of this shit, but it was the grocery store guy who quickly got whisked out of the news as soon as they found out that he had a fairly ethnic-sounding Middle Eastern name. That disappeared in a hurry. There were other the Aurora Theater shooting. That was another one off of this. What is going on in Colorado, you guys? Seriously. I have no idea. You guys have access to legal weed. You shouldn't be this uptight and angry and ready to shoot at everything. So, that's what we're seeing coming off of that, and that is still a developing story. And we will continue to watch that and see where that goes. Let's talk Rittenhouse. Starting with NBC News, Kyle Rittenhouse jury begins deliberations on Tuesday. From David K. Lee. The fate of the 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, who gunned down 2 men and injured another, nice propaganda with that, during 2020 protests is in the hands of Wisconsin jurors, who are set to begin deliberations on Tuesday morning. His trial concluded Monday after the Kenosha County Assistant District Attorney James Krause had the last word in a rebuttal of the defense's closing arguments just before 7 p.m. Full disclosure, I have not seen that particular one. I was still listening to the defense attorney come back and do his cross-closing argument when the Red and Ed show was scheduled to start, so I will probably finish that out later on today, because, jury deliberations, we're not going to see a lot of that until the actual announcement comes back out. So we will be watching for that. His trial concluded Monday after the Kenosha assistant... let's see, I get that one already. It's not up to Mr. Rittenhouse to be the judge and the jury, and eventually the executioner, Krause said. The only imminent threat that night was Mr. Rittenhouse. He is guilty. Really? Throwing a bag, guns going off behind him everywhere, and somebody grabbing his gun and saying, fuck you. That's not a threat. Swinging a skateboard at somebody, that's not a threat. Pointing a gun at somebody, that's not a threat. Rittenhouse argued throughout the trial that he was acting in self-defense amid a chaotic scene when he fatally shot 2 men on August 25, 2020 during a demonstration that erupted after the police shooting of Jacob Blake. Oh, Randy, my home Wi-Fi is FBI surveillance band number 3. Just so you know. His life was under threat, defense lawyer Mark Richards told jurors Monday every person who shot was attacking Kyle, he said. In closing arguments, ADA Binger challenged Rittenhouse's claim of self-defense in gunning down Anthony Hoover and Joseph Rosenbaum. They enjoy the thrill of going around telling people what they do without the courage or honor to back it up and without the legal authority to do so, he said. Yeah, I don't really give a fuck about your legal authority. And then there's this, by the way. We will be talking about this way, way more in depth. Every video that we saw of Rittenhouse, who's supposedly the most dangerous human being that ever lived. Every video that we saw of him, how was his finger in the trigger guard? Outside of the trigger guard. Straight up. It was there ready for action if needed, but not where something could accidentally bump and he could pull the trigger. Now, I have no doubt that the bailiff inspected this, that the bailiff inspected the weapon, and the fact that he's holding it that far above his shoulder either, that also really surprises me, but whatever, it is what it is. I have no doubt that the sheriff's department inspected the weapon. I have no doubt that the bailiff inspected the weapon a second time. I have no doubt that this thing has been inspected, taken apart, put back together 75 times. before it got into Mr. Binger's hands. But what is the first rule of firearm safety? Even if it has been inspected 75 times, what is the first rule of firearm safety? Treat every gun as if it is loaded at all points. Always treat every firearm that you put into your hand as if it's loaded. Rittenhouse, 18, is accused of intentional homicide in the slaying of Hoover and reckless homicide in the death of Rosenbaum. Moments before closing arguments begin on Monday, Judge Bruce Schrader dismissed a count of illegal possession of a dangerous weapon by a person younger than 18. The misdemeanor, punishable by up to 9 months in jail, was considered one of the prosecution's stronger counts. No one disputes that Rittenhouse was 17 when he walked the streets of Kenosha armed with a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 rifle, part of a genre of firearms modeled after the iconic AR-15 long gun that was initially developed for military use. But Schrader cited an exception in the law dealing with hunting, the age of the defendant, and the length of the barrel for dismissing the account. The reason observers correctly believe the misdemeanor gun charge was a slam dunk is because it's not disputed that Kyle Rittenhouse was under 17 and that he possessed the gun, NBC News legal analyst Danny Savello said. No, he was over 17. But the criminal statute itself is more complicated than that. For the statute to apply, the defendant had to also violate a hunting regulation that only applied to people under 16. The defense discovered that was essentially an error in the legislation, that Kyle Rittenhouse cannot violate the law that only applies to someone under 16. Rittenhouse still faces 5 other charges stemming from the fatal shootings. On Monday, Binger played the video that appeared to show Rittenhouse putting down the fire extinguisher and raising his weapon. Then he recreated the scene for jurors, putting down the water bottle in place of the fire extinguisher and raised the actual weapon in court. That is what provokes this entire incident, Binger said. When the defendant provokes the incident, he loses the right to self-defense. You cannot claim self-defense against a danger you create. Binger tried to flip the claims of self-defense, saying the people in the crowd confronting Rittenhouse that night were the only ones protecting themselves. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that this situation, the crowd has the right to try to stop an active shooter. He said, they have the right to protect themselves. The defendant is not the only one in the world who has the right to self-defense. Defense lawyer Richards bristled at the term active shooter. Ladies and gentlemen, Kyle was not an active shooter, Richards said in the closing arguments. That is a buzzword that the state wants to latch onto because it excuses the actions of the mob. The defense lawyer also argued that Rittenhouse is the victim of political prosecution, and that is going to be the key part of this, of whether or not this is political or not. And this is, the judge came out and said this is not a political trial right off the beginning. He said that in the explanation of the charges for the jury. He said that at the start of the trial, when we first looked at everything, he said that on the day that Rittenhouse was up on the stand, he said this is not a political trial, but yet this is a political trial. And this is going to have far-reaching political ramifications because our current sitting House Plant-in-Chief decided that he needed to use the image of Kyle Rittenhouse as a campaign ad, which means that every one of his drooling fucking simp followers believes whatever it is that the mainstream media tells them about Kyle Rittenhouse without actually watching any of the facts, any of the videos, just what NBC doctored up to come back and tell them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a political case, he said. The district attorney's office is marching forward with this case because they need someone to be responsible. They need someone to put and say, we did it. He's the person who brought the terror to Kenosha. Kyle Rittenhouse is not that individual. The rioters, the demonstrators, who turned into rioters, those are the individuals. Richards painted a picture of the chaos, trash fires, a mob, and a wall of people destroying cars. He described Hoover's skateboard as a deadly weapon, a bystander's flashlight as a potential weapon, and another demonstrator armed with a 2x4. The defense suggested that Rosenbaum might be a danger to others. He was! Kyle shot Rosenbaum to stop a threat to his person. Because if Rosenbaum had got that gun, I don't for a minute believe that he would have used it against someone else. Or he wouldn't have used it against someone else, Richard said. He was irrational and crazy. Rittenhouse walked down a street, intended to put out a fire in a trash receptacle, and was being set up by attackers for an ambush, Richard said. Yes, the pincer movement. Where Rosenbaum hid behind a car. Well, he knew that Rittenhouse was coming back up into him. He hid behind a car. That was one of the points that the prosecution made about this. Well, he was what kind of shot his own prosecution in the foot, by the way, because in the closing arguments, Binger said, and I did hear this. I haven't seen any mainstream news coverage of this, but I did hear this. Binger did say that, Rosenbaum was far enough in front of Rittenhouse that he had no idea that Rittenhouse was running down the road behind him, which completely blows he was running away from Rittenhouse and Rittenhouse was chasing him down the road. That completely blows that out of the water. Which, by the way, also blows the narrative that is being fed from the mainstream media. Well, Kyle Rittenhouse chased down an unarmed man. No, he didn't. But he did. He came down the road. He hid behind a car. While Zeminski stopped and turned a gun on Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse raised his gun back up. And then Rosenbaum jumped out of the car behind him. We all saw the overhead video. We don't know what was going on in Zeminski's head because he didn't come forward. He wasn't called as a witness, which I think is a crime against humanity. He should have been on the stand that day. At least one day, the defense should have called him up onto the stand and say, why? Why did you shoot a gun into the air? But all that we could hear about was Thomas Binger saying, I have no sympathy for the Zeminskis because I'm prosecuting them currently for arson right now. He's a slimy prick is what he is. But we all saw the video jumping out from behind the car. That set this whole thing in motion. The mob has now formed and is chasing him down, he said. Rittenhouse was headed toward police lights to inform police that what had happened when two others in the crowd attacked him, the defense attorney said. Kyle is zero threat to anyone, Richard said, describing the defendant's attitude. Everything is good. Leave me alone. I'm going to the police. Huber swung his skateboard at Rittenhouse and tried to take his head off, the lawyer said. The defense insisted that Rosenbaum was trying to disarm Rittenhouse to use his own weapon against him. He was a bad man. He was there. He was causing trouble. He was a rioter, and my client had to deal with him that night alone, Richard said. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rosenbaum was shot because he was chasing my client and going to kill him, take his gun, and carry out the threats that he made. Huber and Rosenbaum were not armed when Rittenhouse shot them, but Grosskreutz, 27, came toward him with a pistol in hand when Rittenhouse of Antioch opened fire. Mr. Grosskreutz decided he was going to shoot my client. Unfortunately, my client shot him first, Richards told the jurors. He argued that Wisconsin law protects what Rittenhouse did. My client does not have to take a beating from the hands of his mob, Richards said, later concluding that opening fire was something he was privileged to do. Earlier in the day, Binger likened the threats of the victims posed to Rittenhouse to that of combatants in a barroom brawl. You don't bring a gun to a fistfight, he said. What the defendant wants you to believe is that because he is the one who brought the gun, he gets to kill. Okay. What about a lady walking down the road in the dark that's about to go get pulled into an alley or gets confronted by people up on there? That would have been, under most circumstances, a fistfight. Maybe there's a knife involved or something else like that, but for the most part, that's a fistfight. If somebody comes in and corners a woman intending to rape her on the road, but if she pulls out a Derringer or something out of her purse and equalizes the situation, that's bringing a gun to what would essentially be a fist fight. How would you prosecute that, Mr. Binger? The prosecution relied heavily on the video of the mayhem in Kenosha that night and the pictures of the aftermath. When Binger displayed an autopsy photograph of Rosenbaum's bloodied body on a gurney, and then another image of his mangled hand, some jurors appeared to avert their eyes from the courtroom TV monitors. Binger appeared to notice jurors wincing when he showed the bloody pictures of Gage Grosskreutz, whose right bicep was virtually blown off by Rittenhouse. Grosskreutz is a paramedic. No, he is not. From suburban Milwaukee, who was volunteering at the protest. No, he was not. When you fire an AR-15 at someone at close range, this is what it looks like. I guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen. The defendant had no clue what his gun was capable of, Binger said. That's any gun. And that's one of the things that pisses me off about this. And we'll move on from this story in just a second here. But that's one of the things that pisses me off about this. He brought an AR-15. He has no idea what that could do. Really? Because guns are made for killing. Whether defensively or offensively. The gun has no idea. But they're made to stop a threat or to incite a threat. But he loaded it with full metal jacket. Okay. There aren't a lot of options for bullets. Full metal jacket is the most common one out there. I believe... Hold on, I have to think about this and take stock for a second. I believe that every piece of ammunition in this house is full metal jacket currently. It's just a common type of ammo. But to come in here and try to convince a jury of people who don't know about guns, which I'm sure there are a bunch of people out there who don't know anything about ammunition, guns or otherwise. I mean, the term full metal jacket sounds scary. It sounds scary. It was that movie with Charlie Sheen. Oh no, what do we do? He didn't even bother paying attention to it. He didn't concern himself with what he was doing to other people, but this is what happened. Let's not flinch away from this. So, and that's one of the things that went up with this, and I mean, this whole thing was a shit show from the beginning, but that's all that Binger has is emotional argument. That's all that he has had from the beginning. Let's grab one here from Channel 3000. Defense attorney explains what jurors will consider as they deliberate in the Rittenhouse trial. Jurors in the Rittenhouse trial are set to begin deliberations Tuesday morning after the prosecutors and defense attorneys made their closing arguments on Monday. Rittenhouse faces 5 felonies for shooting 3 people, 2 fatally, during the summer's unrest in Kenosha sparked by a police officer shooting of Jacob Blake. The charges include 1 count of first-degree reckless homicide, 2 counts of recklessly endangering safety, 1 count of first-degree intentional homicide, 1 count of attempted first-degree homicide. All 5 charges include modifiers, including involving the use of a dangerous weapon. Judge Schrader dropped a gun charge Rittenhouse faced on Monday. We've seen a lot of testimony, we've seen a lot of contentious advocacy between the groups of lawyers, Jessica Nicholson Getz, a Madison-based defense attorney who briefly represented Rittenhouse, said. Jurors will have to consider a lot as they weigh whether Rittenhouse, as his attorneys argued, acted in self-defense or if he instigated the violence as prosecutors alleged. In the context of first-degree homicide, they simply need to conclude that Kyle believed it was necessary to act with deadly force. Nicholson Getz said, second-degree intentional homicide requires an objective element as well. Nicholson Getz said Wisconsin has a robust self-defense law, but it's intentional homicide charges that carry the longest prison sentences if convicted. The maximum penalty for first-degree reckless homicide is much higher than that of second-degree, she said. Nicholson Getz expects the jury to acquit Rittenhouse on the homicide charges. I think the facts support acquittals, she said. Regardless of the outcome, Nicholson Getz knows someone will be upset with the verdict. I think this is an extremely divisive case. I think that there are going to be people that are unhappy no matter which verdict comes out, she said. I don't know. I honestly don't know at this point. It's hard, just because of the way that this is and the way that our country believes that prosecution is supposed to go, especially with trial by social media. I mean, coming into this, everybody had decided already whether Kyle was guilty or not guilty. I have tried to take an objective stance to this. But looking just at the videos that we saw and everything else that I have had to work with over the last year and 3 months, It is hard for me not to form my own opinion. I've tried to come at this objectively. I can't see a reason why, under the standard of reasonable doubt, that this could be prosecuted. And the defense doesn't have to prove innocence. Kyle is into the courtroom presumed innocent. It was on the prosecution to prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It is not on the defense to prove him innocent beyond a reasonable doubt. It is on the defense to put the reasonable doubt in there, so there's enough doubt to say that, no, I don't think that he is guilty. He is already innocent, according to Wisconsin state statute, and until a jury of his peers finds otherwise, with the facts that are presented, beyond a reasonable doubt, he walks. But what have we seen? Especially going up as high as Trump. As high as the former commander-in-chief. And even some people out there who decided to make the same standard for Biden, with Tara Reade, with Kavanaugh, with the mattress girl, with Duke LaCrosse, with all of these things where evidentiarily a lot of these people were acquitted or nothing was ever brought forward by evidence. They were already decided guilty and needed to prove their innocence for this. That's not how the standard works. But I don't know if the jury is going to know that with the way that our legal system has been bastardized by social media. I don't. I have no faith in this at this point. Not because the prosecution put on a specifically strong case. Not because the defense put out a specifically strong case. Or specifically weak case in this case. I have no faith in what I see as what justice is going to be served. I have no faith in that. Because of the way that media and social media has driven this country. But it's on 12 people as of this morning. All right, from the Associated Press. Rittenhouse judge back in the spotlight during jury instructions. From Kathleen Foodie. The judge in Kyle Rittenhouse's murder trial, already the subject of scrutiny for various actions in this case, drew attention again Monday for his handling of jury instructions. Schrader, who had been expected to file final instructions on Sunday, took arguments from attorneys until the last minute Monday. As he edited the instructions from the bench, he then sent the jury out midway through to talk with the attorneys about making them clearer. The last-minute activity focused on a crucial procedure, developing instructions about how jurors should determine whether Rittenhouse is guilty of each charge against him. On Monday, just hours before jurors got the case, Schrader dismissed a charge of being a minor in possession of a firearm. Instructions are always closely scrutinized by attorneys and judges. In a case complicated by multiple charges, victims, and Rittenhouse's self-defense claim, the document's importance is clear. Schrader, Rittenhouse's attorney, and prosecutors spent all day Friday discussing the directions, continued written communications over the weekend, and had protests and worries to hash out on Monday before the 36 pages were ready for Schrader to read aloud to jurors. At one point, Schrader bemoaned the defense instructions. "I feel just terrible about giving this kind of stuff," he said outside the jurors' presence. Persecutors repeatedly asked Schrader not to veer far from the model instructions and disagreed with the judge's preferred wording for some procedures. At one point, Persecutor Binger told Schrader, "That's not the law." Legal experts have for decades debated how to make instructions more understandable to jurors unfamiliar with the archaic and confusing terms in statutes and criminal codes. In Wisconsin, a committee of judges created a model jury instructions, which attorneys and individual trial judges can use as is or adapt for specific cases. As with the courtroom proceedings, those are trial judges' decisions, and Sarah Gordon, a professor of law at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, who has studied juries. Gordon said that she would almost always advocate for more explanation to jurors because it's likely the last opportunity to explain the law, barring jurors' questions as they deliberate. The trial itself is about giving all the facts to the jury through the testimony and evidence, she said. In the deliberation room, the jury has to apply the law to all those facts, and it's difficult to do. About 30 minutes into his reading of the instructions to jurors, Schrader began explaining his own words how jurors should discuss primary charges and lesser charges, then fell silent. "I've got myself into a mid-sentence and I don't like it," he said. Then he turned off his microphone and called the attorneys to the front of the courtroom. "I've worked with instructions all weekend. We've discussed them by email, and then I'm reading them, and little things are striking me as I read them," he said after the jurors left the room. Phyllis Cote, a clinical professor at Florida's International University's College of Law and a retired judge, said carefully scrutinizing and revising jury instructions and even stopping mid-instruction to correct a potential error are wise steps to try and give jurors a clear understanding of the law. Cote declined to comment specifically on Schrader's approach, saying judicial ethics prevented her from commenting on a pending case or another judge. Judges often begin reading instructions aloud and spot typos or errors, she said. "You don't want to just change without having another side weigh in," she said. "That becomes a basis for appeal. The best thing to do then is to stop and to talk it out." Yeah, I listened to all that, and it was incredibly dry, as usual. We've all seen court proceedings. We all saw this with the Chauvin one too, where the judge came out and read this all back out to everybody, but yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. Let's listen to... I guess I don't have a longer video. I thought I did. Alright, let's listen to Binger here for just a second, talking about what it is that Kyle did. I had to step away from the desk for just a half a second, so I'll be right back. But let's listen to Thomas Binger.
He just happens to stumble into it. So what does he do that night? Oh, let me tell you all the awful things Joseph Rosenbaum did. He tipped over a porta potty that had no one in it. He swung a chain. He lit a metal garbage dumpster on fire. Oh, and there's this empty wooden flatbed trailer that they pulled out in the middle of the road, and they tipped it over to stop some bearcats, and they lit it on fire. Oh, and he said some bad words. He said the N-word. He just happens to stumble into it. So what does he do that night? Oh, let me tell you all the awful things Joseph Rosenbaum did. He tipped over a porta potty that had no one in it. He swung a chain. He lit a metal garbage dumpster on fire. Oh, and there's this empty wooden flatbed trailer that they pulled out in the middle of the road, and they tipped it over to stop some bearcats, and they lit it on fire. Oh, and he said some bad words. He said the N-word.
How soy can you really be just to come back and listen? Oh no! Oh no! He said the N-word! Oh no! Oh goodness! Oh my! Alright, let's grab one from WECT6, NBC. Persecutor Rittenhouse provoked the bloodshed in Kenosha. From Scott Bauer, Michael Tarm, and Amy Forliti of the Associated Press. Those are the three people who have been paying the most attention to this trial. I recognize the names because everything that comes from this particular wire has these three names on it. Kyle Rittenhouse provoked bloodshed in the streets of Kenosha by bringing a semi-automatic rifle to protest and menacing others, and when the shooting stopped, he walked off like a hero in a Western, the prosecutor said in closing arguments Monday at Rittenhouse's murder trial. Yeah, I will admit to the fact, and I think it was cool to see, where they actually came out and said, oh, well, this is the hero that we need, but, you know, once again, we're going to talk about social media's effect on this. And I don't think that social media did anybody any favors for this, especially on the defense side, because there were so many people who show the Rittenhouse, the drawn Rittenhouse with the rifle, with his hand up, praising him to be a hero. We saw a lot of that. But Rittenhouse's lawyer countered the shooting started after the young man was ambushed by a crazy person that night and feared his gun was going to be wrested away and used to kill him. Defense attorney Mark Richards said Rittenhouse acted in self-defense. After a full day of arguments, the jurors were told to return Tuesday morning for the start of deliberations in the case that has stirred fierce debate in the U.S. over guns, vigilantism, and law and order. 18 jurors have been hearing the case. 12 who will decide Rittenhouse's fate, and 6 will be designated alternates, will be determined by drawing numbers from a lottery drum. Rittenhouse, then 17, shot 2 men to death and wounded a third during a tumultuous night of protests against racial injustice in the summer of 2020. Rittenhouse said he went to Kenosha from his home in Antioch to protect property from rioters in the days after a black man was shot by a white police officer. Rittenhouse, a former police youth cadet, is white, as were those that he shot. In closing arguments, prosecutor Binger said Rittenhouse was a wannabe soldier and looking for trouble that night. Binger repeatedly showed the jury drone footage that he said depicted Rittenhouse pointing the AR-style weapon at demonstrators. "This is provocation! This is what starts the incident," the persecutor declared. He told the jury, "You lose the right to self-defense when you're the one who brought the gun. You are the one creating the danger when you're the one provoking other people." Rittenhouse, now 18, faces a mandatory sentence of life if convicted of the most serious charge against him, first-degree intentional homicide, which is Wisconsin's top murder count. Binger zeroed in on the killing of 36-year-old Joseph Rosenbaum, who was the first man gunned down that night and whose shooting set in motion the ones that followed. The persecutor repeatedly called it a murder, saying it was unjustified. The persecutor reminded jurors that Rittenhouse testified he knew Rosenbaum was unarmed. Binger also said there was no video in support of the defense claim that Rosenbaum threatened to kill Rittenhouse. Binger disputed the contention that Rosenbaum was trying to grab Rittenhouse's rifle. "Mr. Rosenbaum was not even within arm's reach when the first shot occurs," Binger said. He rejected the claim that Rittenhouse had no choice but to shoot, saying that he could have run away. Well, the powder burns on the hands tell a different story. And Binger argued that once Rosenbaum was wounded, he was not even capable of taking away the gun, which was strapped to Rittenhouse's body since he was falling to the ground with a fractured pelvis. Rittenhouse kept firing, delivering what prosecutors called the kill shot on Rosenbaum's back. "I think we can all agree that we shouldn't have 17-year-olds running around our streets with AR-15s because this is exactly what happens," Binger said. In his own closing arguments, Richards, the defense attorney, called Rosenbaum a crazy person who was hell-bent on causing trouble that night and went after Rittenhouse unprovoked. "Mr. Rosenbaum was shot because he was chasing my client and going to kill him. Take his gun away and carry out the threats that he made," Richards said, adding that Rittenhouse never pointed the gun before being chased. It didn't happen. Richards said the enlarged image that the prosecutor shows Rittenhouse pointing his gun at protesters, hocus pocus, that doesn't prove anything. Rittenhouse himself looked largely impassive during the arguments, occasionally jotting notes. His mother, Wendy Rittenhouse, listened intently behind him. With the verdict near, Evers says that the 500 National Guard members would be prepared for duty in Kenosha if requested by local law enforcement. So, a few things that went on with that, and a few things to go off of that. Now, if he did indeed point the gun, that doesn't change anything. And the thing with Rosenbaum, that's one of the things. And you know, I do wish at some point that we could bring him back and at least listen to what it was that he had to say about what was going on that night. And I'm sure that he would be well trained by the prosecution as well to come and say, I had nothing, I was doing nothing wrong, and I felt great, and this and that and the next thing. We cannot forget the fact that Rosenbaum had allegedly just checked out of St. Luke's for a suicide attempt. And even if he didn't die by Rittenhouse's guns, if he had killed Rittenhouse and taken the gun away, then running out into a crowd, especially because he was with friendly people, ran out into the crowd where, beyond the Bearcats, where all the other people were defending car source this and car source that, and started shooting in a blaze of glory, and then got lit up by every single AR-15 out there after he was shooting out in a blaze of glory. I contend that this guy was out here trying to die. I've contended that since I first found out that he was allegedly in the mental hospital. That was not admissible by evidence, but that's what I've contended since the beginning. He was out there specifically trying to die. And that's a big part of the reason that the prosecution made sure that that little detail was thrown out. Is because it is devastating to their case, the fact that he had just, not that long ago, been released from suicide watch. And then chased after somebody with a very, very big gun. So, that's what we see off of that. From Reuters, U.S. teen Rittenhouse provoked everything in deadly shootings, prosecutor says. The prosecution at the murder trial of Kyle Rittenhouse on Monday accused the teenager of provoking the confrontation that led to him shooting 3 men during a volatile protest over recent unpolicing in Wisconsin last year. Kenosha ADA Thomas Binger told the jury to ignore Rittenhouse's argument that he was attacked and fired his semi-automatic AR-15 style rifle in self-defense, killing 2 men and wounding a third. Instead, Binger said Rittenhouse instigated the fatal clashes by brandishing his weapon. Binger tried to demonstrate this by raising the gun in front of the jury. "This is what provokes this entire incident," he said. "You cannot hide behind self-defense if you provoke the incident. If you create the danger, you forfeit the right to self-defense by bringing that gun, aiming it at people, threatening people's lives. The defendant provoked everything," the prosecutor said. After he spoke, the defense began its final address to the jury and was expected to highlight the considerable evidence presented at the trial supporting Rittenhouse's argument that he was attacked. The trial is almost the most closely watched case involving a civilian's right to self-defense since George Zimmerman was acquitted in the fatal shooting of Trayvon Martin, an unarmed black teenager, in 2013. Like Zimmerman, Rittenhouse has emerged as a divisive figure, viewed as heroic by some conservatives who favor expansive gun rights and as a symbol of an out-of-control American gun culture by many on the left. Excuse me. Multiple witnesses have testified that Rosenbaum, one of the 2 men Rittenhouse fatally shot, had charged and lunged at the teenager. "Mr. Rosenbaum was shot because he was chasing my client and going to kill him. Take his gun and carry out the threats he made," Mark Richards, Rittenhouse's attorney, said in closing arguments. Rittenhouse, 18, is charged with killing Rosenbaum, 36, and Anthony Huber, and wounding Gage Grosskreutz, 28. On August 25, 2020, the shootings took place in Kenosha, Wisconsin during the protest marred by arson, rioting, and looting that followed the police shooting of a black man, Jacob Blake, who was left paralyzed from the waist down. You know what's funny about that, by the way? Binger, and I don't know if he was the ADA, who would have been in charge for the Jacob Blake shooting, but somebody in the ADA's office. Well, let me back up for just a sec. Binger spent an exorbitant amount of time talking about the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse shot 4 times. That Joseph Rosenbaum ceased to be a threat after that first time. Now, all of these shots happened within a second, within 3/4 of a second of each other. So the flip in judgment would have been the thing, but somebody in the exact same office that Binger works out of, if not Binger himself, I don't know who was leading this one, decided that the 7 shots from Rustin Chesky into the back of Jacob Blake were justified. And the 4 shots into Michael Bell were also justified. That's an older case in Kenosha that, I mean, if you don't live in Kenosha, I would not be surprised if you don't know about. Somebody in that same office, the ADA's office, decided that those 2 incidents were okay. Multiple shots within a second. Until the threat stopped. But for whatever reason, because they're prosecuting Rittenhouse, they're not okay for him. That is an interesting thing to me. And there again, I don't know if it was Binger himself that did it. I have no idea if it was actually him that did it. But somebody in that office looked at the evidence in the Jacob Blake case and the Michael Bell case both and decided, no, multiple shots were fine until the threat stopped. And that's very interesting to me. But that's what we see coming off of that. Here's an op-ed for you from the New York Post. From irresponsibly pointing a gun to Tisking, DA's closing in Rittenhouse trial was pathetic. From James A. Gagliano. The case against Kyle Rittenhouse collapsed almost before it began. As the prosecution and defense made their closing arguments on Monday, with the jury likely to get the case on Tuesday, it looks even more likely that he will be acquitted on murder charges. Rittenhouse killed 2 men and wounded a third while protecting businesses during riots in Kenosha. He argues self-defense. The performance of ADA Thomas Binger was especially pathetic. The prosecutor sought to diminish some of the actions committed by Rosenbaum before his encounter with Rittenhouse, sarcastically intoning, "He tipped over a porta potty that had no one in it. He swung a chain. He lit a metal garbage dumpster on fire. Oh, and there's this empty wooden flatbed trailer they pulled out in the middle of the road, and they tipped it over to stop some bearcats. And they lit it on fire." Yes, God forbid that they get the police involved and police easy access to come down there and investigate when they're getting ready to go kill a fucking teenager. Oh, and he said some bad words. He said the N-word. Tisk, 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 as he mockingly wagged his finger. This couldn't have played well to the jury. And in a trial whereby the defendant is accused of reckless actions, Binger committed his own while attempting to act out Rittenhouse's actions with his rifle. With the recent accidental shooting on a movie set in New Mexico still fresh in our minds, Binger sweeps the courtroom spectator section with a weapon that incredulously breaks firearm handling safety rule number 1. Never place your finger on the trigger until you have acquired your target and you may have to neutralize. Yet another example of those prosecuting gun crimes with little understanding of guns. Yes, the famous picture from Matt Walsh. Kenosha DA pointed a gun at the jury with his finger on the trigger. And, by the way, just a little technicality for you, Mr. Gagliano. That is the second rule of firearm safety. The first is to treat every firearm as if it's loaded. Rittenhouse's attorney, Mark Richards, rightly said the case explodes in Binger's face. When the persecutors reflexively file impossible-to-prove charges in order to satisfy a mob, they almost always get manhandled in court. The top charge here is first-degree intentional homicide, and overcharging not backed up by the facts. Witnesses and testimony have revealed that Rittenhouse only shot 3 men after they were charging him, hitting with a skateboard or pointing a gun at him. And that's another thing that I've said right from the beginning of all this, right from the first time I started talking about this. I don't agree with charging Rittenhouse with manslaughter in the second or third degree. I don't agree with that. I think that this is clear-cut self-defense and he should walk. But there was more of a case for second and third degree manslaughter than there was for first degree intentional homicide. The prosecution at least had a chance with those charges. They at least would have had a chance to prove those beyond a reasonable doubt. I still don't think with his performance that they could have, but they would have at least had a chance. I mean, this involves first degree intentional manslaughter. I've always made the comparison, and I did so with the Chauvin trial because they tried to put that one back up on the top too. That would have involved Kyle Rittenhouse getting up, pulling his t-shirt on, and said, "Oh, that Joseph Rosenbaum, I'm going to kill that motherfucker. I'm going to Kenosha to kill Joseph Rosenbaum." Kenosha County Judge Bruce E. Schrader gave 1 win for the state when he allowed the jury to consider lesser charges. It has obviously dawned on the prosecutors that their case isn't solid. So, yeah, absolutely. All right. And of course, we've heard the list of charges. Let's put this in one more time for the record.
He just happens to stumble into it. So what does he do that night? Oh, let me tell you all the awful things Joseph Rosenbaum did. He tipped over a porta potty that had no one in it. He swung a chain. He lit a metal garbage dumpster on fire. Oh, and there's this empty wooden flatbed trailer that they pulled out in the middle of the road, and they tipped it over to stop some bearcats, and they lit it on fire. Oh, and he said some bad words. He said the N-word. He just...
Oh, is that all? Is that all that he did? You know, not wrap a chain, not came out here. Come on, shoot me, well, I'm not going to say that word, but... You fuckers on the jury, you better give me the... You better give me the outlet, the outcome that I want, you fuckers. Or I will find you. Look how much gun knowledge I have that I can put this improperly in my shoulder. You fuckers, you know what you have to do, and you know what I'm going to do if you don't. Let's hear what else Mr. Binger has to say about this.
Convince you that Joseph Rosenbaum was going to take that gun and use it on the defendant because they know you can't claim self-defense against an unarmed man like this. You lose the right to self-defense when you're the one who brought the gun, when you're the one creating the danger, when you're the one provoking other people. The defendant fired 4 shots at Joseph Rosenbaum and caused 5 wounds total. The first shot convinced you that Joseph Rosenbaum was going to take that.
You lose the right to self-defense when you're the one who brought the gun. Apparently I don't have the right to self-defense anymore because I bring a gun with me everywhere I go. You hear that, guys? Nobody has a right to self-defense. And that is the exact same thing that you need to pay attention to with this. It's something else that's been said from the beginning of this. This is... Kyle Rittenhouse is not on trial here. As he is the symbol for what's on trial. What's on trial here is the right to self-defense. The right to defend yourself against a leftist. That's what's on trial here. What else do we have? This is another one of those. It's just like the ringtone here. I heard this. I'm like, yeah, they're going to seize on this. They're going to pounce on this.
Kyle shot Joseph Rosenbaum to stop a threat to his person. And I'm glad he shot him, because if Joseph Rosenbaum had got that gun, I don't for a minute believe he wouldn't have used it against somebody else. He was irrational and crazy. Kyle shot Joseph Rosenbaum to stop a threat to his person. And I'm glad he shot him.
Yeah, that's probably not going to play well in lefty circles.
And I'm glad he shot him because...
And of course, that's going to be the part that's clipped out everywhere. I'm glad he shot him. That is speculative on the defense attorney's part. That's what Rosenbaum was going to do, but all the actions do show that way. And I'm not an attorney, so I can say that. But I still, in the strictest legal sense, that is speculative. All right. From the Daily Wire, and I want to see if there's video on this one. There's not. Judge tells jury not to listen to Biden, news media, Trump, and sends jury home, from Amanda Prestigiacomo. Judge Schrader on Monday dismissed the jury for the night after telling them they have an obligation to render a fair verdict, not based on his presumed opinion, news media, or comments from President Biden or his predecessor, President Trump. The time has now come where the great burden of reaching a just, fair, and conscientious decision in this case will be placed totally on you. You will not be swayed by sympathy, passion, prejudice, or political beliefs. You will disregard any impressions that you may have, which you may believe are an opinion of the guilt or innocence of the defendant. Judge Schrader told the jury, You will disregard the claims or opinions of any person, news media, or social networking site, the judge continued. You will pay no heed to the opinions of anyone, even the President of the United States, or the President before him. The founders of our country gave you, and you alone, the power and the duty to decide this case, Judge Schrader asserted. The judge then gave general instructions to the jury before sending them home. In the morning at around 9 a.m., the jury will return to begin to deliberate. And that's the thing, is the media especially, but also, yes, the former president, the current president, they're going to try to sway the opinion on this. The mob outside the courthouse is going to try to sway the opinion on this. The fact that we don't have sequestered juries anymore is just insane. And I mean, I don't know if they're going out a side entrance right now, if they're going out the main entrance for anything off of this, but we saw what's out there. Welcome to the Judge Schrader shit show. The skateboard on the light post that says victim. No justice, no peace. These horrific signs out there, out in front of the courthouse by 12 protesters. One guy with a megaphone shouting, "No justice!" And 4 soy responses, "No peace." That's what everybody has to bring into this as we decide what's going on into this. I got a couple more for the Rittenhouse thing, and we'll move on to the infrastructure bill. Jason Whitlock, the absurd coverage of Kyle Rittenhouse's murder trial will likely lead to another Kenosha atrocity. This weekend, appearing on Life, Liberty, and Levine, I butchered a famous quote by Voltaire, the 18th century French philosopher and culture critic. I was using Voltaire to explain the 21st century America. The prolific writer said, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." I applied the quote to the overreaction to the Capitol Selfie Fest on January 6th. Corporate media, social media, and many of our lawmakers have absurdly defined the most peaceful riot as an insurrection or the most dangerous attack on America's democracy since Pearl Harbor. The absurd analogy was justified the atrocity of treating rioters as domestic terrorists. On Saturday, I gave a speech in West Palm Beach, Florida. I used Voltaire again, talked about the 1965 Moynihan Report. It was written by sociologist Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the Assistant Secretary of Labor in the Johnson administration. The Moynihan Report called for an investment in the black family in general and an investment in the black man in particular. Corporate media framed Moynihan and the report as racist. President Lyndon Johnson pulled the support of Moynihan's suggestive initiatives and implemented his Great Society welfare agenda. It was absurd to frame Moynihan's call for investment in the black family as racist. I told my Florida audience that 56 years later, as 75% black children are born into fatherless homes, we're living with the atrocity of the absurd smearing of Moynihan. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. This week in Kenosha, Wisconsin, for the second time in 15 months, may be living with the consequences of selling the absurdities as truth. Today, a jury heard closing arguments in the Rittenhouse murder trial. If the jury justifiably acquits Rittenhouse of all the charges, it is expected that mostly peaceful rioters, looters, and arsonists will peacefully riot, loot, and burn. I believe it's burn, loot, and murder certain areas of Kenosha. Wisconsin Governor Evers has already summoned 500 National Guardsmen to help police Kenosha and surrounding areas. Corporate media may have greatly exaggerated Rittenhouse's importance to American culture. He is on trial for murder because of that exaggeration. There's ample video evidence and eyewitness testimony to substantiate that Rittenhouse fired his rifle in self-defense a year ago. The first victim, Joseph Rosenbaum, suffered from bipolar disorder. He'd previously served a long stint in prison for molesting a minor, hours before being shot by Rittenhouse. Rosenbaum had been released from a mental hospital. He was in a psych ward for an attempted suicide. Rosenbaum had a death wish, and that's why he attacked Rittenhouse and tried to wrestle away his AR-15. The second victim, Anthony Huber, clubbed Rittenhouse with a skateboard. It's all on video. Huber had a criminal record for domestic assault. The third victim, Gage Grosskreutz, admitted walking up to Rittenhouse and pointing a gun at Rittenhouse's head. Rittenhouse acted in self-defense. He should not be on trial for murder. Like I said, I don't think he should be on trial for anything, but if we had to throw a trial out there somewhere, if there had to be state action somewhere off of this, the most appropriate thing that the prosecution would have a chance at proving beyond a reasonable doubt, and it's a slim chance at best, is second-degree manslaughter. That is the best case scenario for them on a non-politically charged trial. And I don't even think they could get that, but that is the best case scenario. There is no proof that Rittenhouse is a white supremacist, as has been insinuated by our president, and many people in the media. Rittenhouse is white. All 3 of his victims were white. Rittenhouse lived in Illinois with his mother. His father lived in Kenosha. It's not difficult to understand how and why he felt compelled to go to Kenosha and attempt to protect businesses and citizens there. You can argue whether a 17-year-old should have involved himself in a situation as volatile as Kenosha, but he's not on trial for visiting Kenosha. He's on trial for murder, and he's on trial for whether he acted in self-defense. The Rittenhouse trial is an atrocity. The riots ravaged Kenosha in the aftermath of Jacob Blake being shot by cops were an atrocity. Corporate media framed the shooting of Blake as an unarmed, innocent black man being shot by racist white cops. Blake was armed with a knife and wrestled with police and had an arrest warrant for sexual assault. So that's what we see coming off of that. And the last one, before we move off of this, just a little bit of thumb our nose over at PolitiFact here. From Fox News, PolitiFact roasted for previous fact-checking claim Kyle Rittenhouse's possession of weapon wasn't legal. From Joseph A. Wolfson. PolitiFact is under fire for a poorly aged fact-check claiming Rittenhouse's firearm possession was illegal. Judge Schrader, who is overseeing the Rittenhouse murder trial, made headlines on Monday over his decision to throw out a 6th charge against the 18-year-old for having a dangerous weapon as a minor. Rittenhouse was 17 at the time of the deadly shootings. Schrader tossed the charges after prosecutors conceded that Rittenhouse's rifle was not short-barreled, as the law has a carve-out for such weapons. However, just days after the events in Kenosha, PolitiFact asserted otherwise. The so-called fact-checking news outlet challenged the claim by a random Facebook user on August 27th, writing, "Carrying a rifle across state lines is perfectly legal," adding, "Based on the laws I can find of this area, at 17 years old, Kyle was perfectly legal to be able to possess that rifle without parental supervision." Carrying a rifle across state lines as a minor is illegal, by the way. As an adult, it's not. Well, that depends on the laws of the state you're leaving, the laws of the state that you're going into. If it is cased and unloaded, if you don't have a reciprocity clause for your concealed carry with Illinois, it is legal to carry a weapon across state lines from Wisconsin into Illinois, if it is cased and unloaded. If you have an Illinois concealed carry permit as well as a Wisconsin one, you're golden. You can carry it on the back of your hip, no matter what. But not as a minor. And the other direction as well. You can carry it from Illinois back into Wisconsin as well, because of the laws of those 2 states. But like Massachusetts, that's a perfectly legal one. If you own a firearm in Massachusetts, it has to have be originally sold in Massachusetts. The only carve-out they have is for bringing weapons into Massachusetts to sell. You cannot carry a weapon from outside of Massachusetts into Massachusetts. I almost found that out the hard way. And once again, a special thank you to that one Walpole police officer who took mercy on me because I didn't know. But yes, it is absolutely, it's illegal for you to carry a weapon from outside of Massachusetts into Massachusetts because of their state laws. Is that true? State law suggests not, PolitiFact's Daniel Funk wrote at the time. According to the article, a Facebook post was flagged to PolitiFact as part of Facebook's efforts to combat false news and misinformation on its newsfeed. The Wisconsin Department of Justice honors concealed carry permits issued in Illinois, but Rittenhouse did not have a permit to begin with. He was not legally old enough to carry a firearm in Wisconsin, Funk wrote, before going into concealed carry and open carry laws in Wisconsin, Rittenhouse's home state of Illinois. And Funk did cite a Wisconsin gun rights attorney who noted an exception to shotguns and rifles, which allowed children ages 16 to 17 to hunt, but doesn't apply to Rittenhouse because he wasn't in Kenosha to hunt. There was no mention of any legal exception to short-barreled guns. Whether Rittenhouse violated Wisconsin law by possessing a firearm underage is the subject of ongoing litigation, but the Facebook post claimed that it was perfectly legal for the teenager to carry an assault-style rifle in Kenosha. Funk continued, "At best, that's unproven. At worst, it's inaccurate. Either way, we rate the post false." And yeah, it turns out that that was true. All right, let's move on here. We've spent almost an hour talking about Rittenhouse. Let's talk about other stuff. From CNBC, Biden signs the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill into law, unlocking funds for transportation, broadband, utilities, and kickbacks for political donors. Oh wait, that was my addition to this. From Jacob Pramuk, President Biden signed the more than $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill into law Monday, checking off the first piece of his party's sprawling economic agenda. The package will put $550 billion into new funds into transportation, broadband, and utilities. Biden's signature follows years of failed efforts in Washington to overhaul physical infrastructure, improvements that advocates have said will boost the economy and create jobs. New Deal. Dig a hole. Fill it back in. Shovel ready. The legislation will put $110 billion into roads and other major projects. God, I hate roads. It will invest $66 billion in freight and passenger rail, including potential upgrades to Amtrak. Here, Mr. Amtrak, let me just put these dollar bills into your pocket. It will direct $39 billion into public transit systems. The plan will put $65 billion into expanding broadband, a priority after the coronavirus pandemic left millions of Americans at home without effective internet access. It will also put $55 billion into improving water systems and replacing lead pipes. Funding will go out over a 5-year period. It could take months or years for many major projects to start. Before signing the legislation, Biden said, Wait, what just happened? Jill! What did I just sign? Oh, okay. We're finally getting this done! After years of failed attempts in Washington, he stressed the direct benefits Americans will feel from the law, part of a broader sales pitch he will carry out in the coming days and months ahead of the 2022 midterm elections. So my message to the American people is this: America is moving again, and your life is going to change for the better. Come on, man, he said. A refresh of physical infrastructure fulfills one portion of Biden's economic vision. On Monday, he made the case for Congress to pass what Democrats see as a complementary package: $1.75 trillion in investment in the social safety net and climate policy. The House aims to pass its version of the bill this week. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tried to tie the plans as closely together as possible to ensure that the centrist and progressive flanks of her party backed both. The president has said he is confident the House can pass the bill and that we're going to pass it in the Senate. Come on, man. Together with infrastructure, millions of lives will be changed for the better. So here's a question that I have that I don't think CNBC is ever going to ask, because they're going to just move on and let's go talk about the other big spending package. The bill includes $550 billion in new spending for transportation, broadband, and utilities. Question. I have a question. Where'd the other $650 billion go? It's a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. $550 billion in new funds for transportation. And by the way, $110 billion plus $66 billion plus $39 billion plus $65 billion and $55 billion is not $550 billion either, by the way. But we won't focus on that for just a second. Where did the other $650 billion go? Because that's 110 plus 66 is 176 plus 39 is 215 plus 65 billion is 280 billion plus 55 billion is 325 billion. Where did the other 125 billion go as far as that goes? I have questions. I have a lot of questions. From KGET.com, poll results. Do you agree with the decision to pass the infrastructure bill? No. And also, we have no. 64 to 36. From Marcel Maldonado, President Biden signed the more than $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill into law Monday afternoon, marking his term's biggest legislative milestone to date. The package will put $550 billion in new funds into transportation, broadband, and utilities. Advocates say the package will boost the economy and create jobs. Critics say the bill is too expensive. Today we ask, do you agree with the decision to pass the infrastructure bill? So this was a Facebook poll. It looks like it's done by text. And yes, according to Facebook, 64% said no, get this shit the fuck out of here, and 36% said yes. That is not an insignificant number because that's a double-digit difference. That is 18 points where people believe that no, this shouldn't have been done. Some of the comments, no, it's not well thought out in respects to who it's going to truly affect. That money's going to come from the working class people who are already taxed too much. Too much was added to the bill behind closed doors. We taxpayers always suffer from their decisions. They don't speak for the American people, they speak for themselves. I think the people should have more say in the details of how the government spends our money. So those are three of the comments that went off of this. But yeah, where did the other... Let's actually say it. Because we're saying 650 plus 175 between what everything else went up. Where'd the other $825 billion go? I mean, yeah, they told us that what we're getting here is for this much for roads, this much for freight and passenger rail, this much for public transit systems, broadband and water pipes. Okay, I think those things should be handled at a local level or a private level. But where'd the other $8.25 billion go? Anybody? Bueller? Haven't seen that movie either. Bueller? Biden Dems infrastructure bill to mandate anti-drunk driving tech in cars. We're just going to touch on this briefly because we already know this. Apparently, drunk driving is infrastructure too. The $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill President Biden will sign into law Monday includes a provision that will require automakers to install an anti-drunk driving system into all new cars. The mandate falls under the section of the bill that provides $17 billion to road safety programs. Under the timeline laid out by the bill, the mandate could go into effect as soon as 2025. To ensure the prevention of alcohol-impaired driving, fatalities, advanced drunk and impaired driving prevention technology must be standard equipment in all new passenger motor vehicles, the bill says in summing up the findings of the congressional research. Not later than 3 years after the date of enactment of this act, the Secretary shall issue a final rule prescribing a federal motor vehicle safety standard that requires passenger motor vehicles manufactured after the effective date of that standard to be equipped with advanced drunk and impaired driving prevention technology, according to the provision buried in the massive bill. So, there you go. That's infrastructure too. Biden economic advisors suggest passing the $1.75 trillion bill would help solve the effects of inflation. Oh, do tell. I'm listening. From Ben Ziesloft. The Biden admin economic advisor argued that passing the president's $1.75 trillion social spending bill would help combat the effects of inflation. Brian Deese, who directs the National Economic Council, told ABC anchor George Snuffleupagus on Sunday that pending a Build Back Better legislation would address the effects of higher prices on Americans' pocketbooks. That concern actually underscores why it's so important to move forward on the Build Back Better bill that Congress is considering, Deese said about inflationary worries. But of course, they don't show the video of it. The bill is actually going to address the core costs American families are facing in childcare, in housing, and in healthcare. I know you're hoping to pass it, but even if it does pass, it's going to take a while for benefits to kick in. So what can Americans expect in the short term? Is inflation going to get worse before it gets better? Well, we have to finish the job on COVID. We know that people feel comfortable getting out in the economy, going to movies rather than buying television at home. Working in the workplace so we can return to a sense of normalcy in our economy. Deese replied, also citing the passage of the $1 trillion infrastructure legislation. $1.2 trillion, by the way. Nice pivot. So there you go. We have to spend more to make more. From CNN. Healthy debate, but no breakthrough in Biden's critical talks with China's Winnie the Pooh. From Kevin Liptak. When Chinese President Winnie the Pooh beamed into the White House on Monday evening for a virtual summit with President Biden, the two men needed no introduction. No, I would imagine that they don't, actually. We've spent an awful lot of time talking to one another, and I hope we can have a candid conversation tonight as well, Biden said as the talks got underway, sitting at the head of the Roosevelt Room's table as Xi's visage was broadcast on a pair of television screens. From his seat in the cavernous room inside the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, Xi was just as friendly. Although it's not good as face-to-face meeting, Xi said as the summit got underway. I'm very happy to see my old friend. It was an auspicious start to some of the most critical talks of Biden's presidency, given the deteriorating ties between Washington and Beijing and the reality, acknowledged by administration officials, that managing the U.S. relationship with China will amount to Biden's most critical international objective. The affable greetings eventually turned into more serious as Biden raised concerns about human rights, Chinese aggression towards Taiwan, and trade issues. Throughout, the leaders engaged in a healthy debate, according to senior administration officials present for the discussions. Officials said the 3.5-hour summit, which stretched longer than planned, allowed the two men ample opportunity to decide what to do about Hunter's companies in Beijing. But the highly anticipated summit yielded no major breakthroughs, none were expected ahead of time, and officials dismissed the notion that the summit was intended to ease what has become an increasingly tense relationship. I don't think the purpose was particularly to ease tensions, or that was the result. We want to make sure the competition is responsibly managed, that we have the ways to do that. The president's been quite clear on how to engage that stiff competition, the senior admin official said afterwards. So, yeah, they had the conversation. More Biden news. And this short TikTok that's been making the rounds. John Cardillo says, "This isn't normal behavior with a child. If you try to explain this away, you're sick and should be nowhere near children."
What? What?
Now, I actually will make a defense on this. It does look like this has been fact-checked out, and that is his grandson. And at the young age, we've all been there with a grandparent like that too. I still don't think it's particularly right, but it's less egregious, given it's a kiss on the cheek by another family member at this point. I'm not okay with it, but I'm less outraged by it. What else do we have from the Daily Wire? Rumors that Biden is considering moving Harris to the Supreme Court sweeps Washington, D.C. From Joseph Curl. Buried in a recent scathing CNN story about Vice President Kamala Harris's endless woes is a line that has sent shockwaves across Washington, D.C. Two CNN reporters penned a piece on Sunday headlined "Exasperation and Dysfunction" inside Kamala Harris's frustrating start as vice president. The article cited nearly 36 officials in Harris's office and the White House as their sources, but few had nice things to say. But there was one passage that caught everyone's eyes. Defenders and people who care for Harris are getting frantic. When they're annoyed, some pass around a recent Onion story mocking her lack of more substantive work, one with the headline, "White House urges Kamala Harris to sit at a computer all day in case emails come through." When they're depressed, they bat down Aaron Sorkin-style rumor that Biden might try to replace her by nominating her to a Supreme Court vacancy. That chatter has already reached top levels of the Biden orbit, according to one person who's heard it, said the piece. That small rumor prompted the Daily Mail to write, "Harris's approval rating has plunged even further than Biden's in recent months, with rumors swirling that the president is considering appointing her to the Supreme Court as a backdoor method of selecting a new vice president." Well, I don't know how that would go. I don't particularly want to know how that would go. I think they should just dismiss her if they're having so many problems with this. But that's what we see. From CNN. Beto! O'Rourke announces bid to take on Abbott in 2022 Texas gubernatorial race. From Eric Bradner. So you just found something else that you wanted to go waste a bunch of fucking money on? That's awesome, by the way. Thank you, Sour Tangy Benangi. Beto, the former congressman and 2020 Democratic presidential candidate, on Monday launched his campaign to unseat Governor Greg Abbott. "I'm running for governor, man," he tweeted alongside a video announced, "Together, man, we can push past the small and divisive politics that we see in Texas today and get back to the big, bold vision that used to define Texas, man. A Texas big enough for all of us. A Texas where you can get magic dirt and go skateboard and shred on that guitar." And launching a campaign that many Democrats in Texas have identified as the party's only chance of denying Abbott a third term, O'Rourke, an El Paso native and former punk rocker who launched an internet services company and served in the city council before being elected to Congress in 2011, is making his third run for office in years. And by the way, that wasn't an editorial from me. That is right from CNN, that he is a former punk rocker. His first statewide run in Texas, a long-shot Senate campaign against Ted Cruz in 2018, electrified Democrats in the state where the party has rarely been competitive for a generation. He rose from little-known congressman to fundraising dynamo, setting what at the time was the all-time record for money raising for a Senate bid. And he did it with relatively bare-bones campaign structure, mostly driving himself to campaign events across the state with 2 staffers and live streaming it all to Facebook. "Yeah, man, I'm gonna win a statewide seat and then shred on this guitar, bro." Godspeed. From KXAN, out of Austin. "Glad you finally came out of the closet," Governor Abbott on Texas Rep. Ryan Gillen switching parties. I want to do this one first. I thought this one had to do with Beto. I'm sorry. When it said coming out of the closet, I thought that had to do with Beto. Texas state lawmaker leaves Democratic Party for GOP, from Michael Schnell. Texas State Rep. Ryan Gillen announced Monday that he is departing the Democrat Party to join the GOP. After much consideration and prayer with my family, I feel that my fiscally conservative, pro-business, and pro-life values are no longer in step with the Democrat Party of today. And I'm proudly running as a Republican to represent the House District 31, Gillen said in a statement, according to the Texas Tribune. The state lawmaker, who was first elected to the Texas House in 2002, made the move official during an in-person announcement on Monday, alongside Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan. Gillen's move came after the Republican-led redistricting of the Lone Star State transformed the lawmaker's already GOP-leaning district into reliably red territory, the Tribune added. According to ideological rankings by Mark Jones, a political science fellow at Rice University's James A. Baker III Institute for Public Policy, Gillen was the least liberal Democrat in the Texas caucus. The ranking was published earlier this month. And then, yes. Glad you finally came out of the closet, Governor Abbott on Texas Rep. Gillen switching parties. On Monday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott joined Texas House Rep. Ryan Gillen, formerly a Democrat representing District 31, as Gillen announced he'd seek re-election as a Republican. From Floresville, Texas, Abbott commended Gillen for the move, saying Democrat policies no longer represents the values of the Hispanic community in South Texas. Additionally, Abbott said, "This has been the worst kept secret in the Capitol. Everyone has known that Ryan Gillen is really a Republican who was attached to the wrong label. Ryan, we're glad you finally came out of the closet." I don't know if he really came out of the closet at this point. I think that he just realized that he went from a lean red district to a reliably red district, and somebody could primary him out from the right and possibly pull him out from being seated. He wants power. But we'll see what happens with that. What do we want to get through for the rest of this before we do Twitter trending? That actually we might be able to do that for a couple days from now. Let's do the satellite mission stuff, and then let's move on after that. And we'll do this one too because it's hilarious. Wyoming GOP votes to stop recognizing Cheney as a Republican. From the Associated Press. The Wyoming Republican Party will no longer recognize Liz Cheney as a member of the GOP in its second formal rebuke of her criticism of former President Donald Trump. The 31-29 vote Saturday in Buffalo by the State Party Central Committee follows votes by the local GOP officials about one-third of Wyoming's 23 counties to no longer recognize Cheney as a Republican. In February, the Wyoming GOP Central Committee voted overwhelmingly to censure Cheney, Wyoming's lone U.S. representative, for pushing to impeach Trump for his role in the Selfie Fest. Cheney has described her vote to impeach Trump as an act of conscience in defense of the Constitution. Trump incited the mob and lit the flame of that day's events, Cheney said after the attack. It's laughable for anyone to suggest Cheney isn't a conservative Republican, Cheney spokesman Jeremy Adler said in a text message on Monday. She is bound by her oath to the Constitution. Sadly, a portion of the Wyoming GOP leadership has abandoned that fundamental principle and instead allowed themselves to be held hostage to the lies and dangerous and irrational man, Adler said. She is bound by the Constitution, but after being told by her constituency in a overwhelming margin not to vote for the impeachment, she did anyway. Yeah, that's totally bound by the Constitution. The truth is, she didn't represent her constituency in the ones that they wanted, which is her job, and now she's facing the punishment. Cheney is now facing at least 4 Republican opponents in the 2022 primary, including a Cheyenne attorney, Harriet Hageman, whom Trump had endorsed. Hageman, in a statement, called the latest state GOP Central Committee vote fitting, the Casper Star Tribune reported. She gone. Good. No more Bushes, no more Cheneys. Get these people the fuck out of here. Get rid of them. They suck. Alright, in any other news cycle that didn't involve Kyle Rittenhouse, this would have probably been the top story. But now we're using this to close out before we get into Twitter trending for the day. US says it won't tolerate Russia's reckless and dangerous anti-satellite missile test. from Kylie Atwood, Jim Shudo, Kristen Fisher, and Nicole Gowett. The U.S. strongly condemned a Russian anti-satellite test on Monday that forced crew members on the International Space Station to scramble into the spacecraft for safety, calling it a reckless and dangerous act and saying it won't tolerate that behavior that puts international interests at risk. Space Command said Russia tested a direct descent anti-satellite, or DA-ASAT missile, striking a Russian satellite and creating a debris field in low Earth orbit of more than 1,500 pieces of trackable orbital debris that is also likely to generate hundreds of thousands of pieces of small orbital debris. U.S. officials emphasized the long-term dangers and potential global economic fallout from the Russian test, which has created hazards for satellites that provide people around the world with phone and broadband service, weather forecasting, GPS systems which underpin aspects of the financial system, include bank machines, as well as in-flight entertainment and satellite radio for television. Russia has demonstrated a deliberate disregard for the security, safety, stability, and long-term sustainability of the space domain for all nations, said U.S. Space Command General James Dickinson. The debris created by Russia's DA-ASAT will continue to pose a threat to activities in outer space for years to come, putting satellites and space missions at risk, as well as forcing more collision avoidance maneuvers. Space activities underpin our way of life, and this kind of behavior is simply irresponsible. So they blew up their own satellite, but it put everybody else at risk. And here's the thing that really surprises me. Isn't Starfleet supposed to have naval ranking? Why is there a general in Starfleet? Why is Jim Dickinson a general? He should be an admiral. They have They have naval designations. What the fuck, Trump administration? There had to be some Trekkie in your groups when you made Space Force. There had to be some Trekkie in there that knew this little detail. But that's what we see coming off of that. And this is the same story back in over again, so we'll drop off at that. And we'll do the Fauci stuff and the other stuff here. We'll do that tomorrow, but the last thing that we do on a Tuesday is we look at what's trending over on Twitter. So let's get the Explorer page up over on the screen. And let's read into trending. The ad blocker took all the ads out. That's fun. Number 1 is Hobie. I don't know what that means. I saw Hobie today. What's this? Why does this place look familiar? Hobie's going to pack up things. Good night today, too, to the white hair of memories. This must be some K-pop stuff, because I have no idea what's going on here. But I see a lot of Asian people. Anybody? Bueller? Bueller? Alright, anyway. We'll skip Tuesday vibe, Tuesday motivation, stuff like that. Justin Fuente. Breaking. Virginia Tech and Justin Fuente have mutually agreed to part ways. The school announced on Tuesday. That's interesting. I don't know much about college ball, but I knew they're usually pretty loyal about stuff. VT Twitter when they officially announced that Justin Fuente is out. Well, apparently they didn't do so well this season and they decided that it was a coaching decision. I'm not sure. Firing a coach on a Tuesday morning at 7:45 a.m. Eastern is a weird timing, but this kind of time management is somehow fitting for the Justin Fuente era. Well, my college ball friends probably know more about this than I do, so. Next one. Not guilty. Hashtag not guilty. Matthew Colkin says because charging him was politically motivated and Kyle Rittenhouse was 100% innocent, that's why. It was prosecutorial misconduct to bring the charge in the first place. The prosecutor committed an egregious ethics violation. Hashtag not guilty. on an explainer of why the judge dropped the gun charge. Well, because it's the way the Wisconsin law was written, and I told you it was very gray. Kyle Rittenhouse explained to the persecution that video games aren't real. We must stop white privilege in this country. Kyle Rittenhouse trial, hashtag not guilty. Involved in claiming self-defense shooting, $2 million bail. Involved in school shooting, $75,000 bail. Crowder yesterday with the closing statements. Crowder saying also not guilty. Know who's not guilty? This lady, according to Mighty Jeremy. Jared, not gay Jared, by the way. That's who this guy used to be, was not gay Jared over on Louder with Crowder. If Kyle Rittenhouse is found hashtag not guilty, millions of people will suddenly think it's okay to not be murdered at a peaceful protest. I see what you did there, not gay Jared. So yeah, pretty much coming out on Twitter, everybody has made their decision on whether or not he's guilty. And they're trying to make the trend out on Hillary Clinton so that we don't have to come back out and talk about the Rittenhouse thing. I see what they're doing here. Alright, what else do we have here? The fourth one we'll look at is Dragon Ball. We wanted to take a minute and say rest in peace to Hiromi Suri. She passed away 4 years ago and left us with the beautiful parting words in Dragon Ball Super. Everyone, do your best. I'm counting on you all. Rest in peace. Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3 look like this. Today's dad is Son Gohan from Dragon Ball. So I don't know what's going on with Dragon Ball, but apparently that's something that everybody's paying attention to right now. Never seen Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, or anything else like that. I've never seen any of that. I have no idea what any of this is or what any of it means. Alright, and the last one we will do is Costello. I said the last one we're going to do is Costello. Parker Malloy says, Abbott, who's on first? Costello, I'm asking you, who's on first? Abbott, the man's name. Costello, that's whose name? Yes. Well, go ahead, tell me. That's it. That's who. Yes. Apparently that has something to do with this video here from Fox News.
Antidote to the politics and all those woke storylines in so many shows today. You know, I was watching an episode of You where measles came up.
Wait. When did I mention measles?
I don't know. It was on You.
What was on me? What are you talking about? Is Raymond even hearing what I'm saying? I never had the measles.
Was on You.
We never did a measles and vaccine episode. Is this a joke?
I know.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
It was on You. It was on You.
I never had Raymond. I've never had measles. What are you talking about? This is stupid.
It was an episode of a show, Laura.
What's it called?
You.
What is he talking about?
It's called You.
I've never done a show on measles. I just completely gave up. We gotta get
It's
off.
a show called You on Netflix.
There's a show called Laura Ingraham on Netflix. What are you
Never
talking
mind.
about?
I'm moving on to it. I can't explain this to you. A pop singer had an open.
That was funny. Okay. Okay, that was good. Now I see why that was trending. That was really good. It took me because
to the politics and all.
I did think he was talking about something news related, not a story about a stalker, TV show about a stalker. But the what she said at the very end, there's a show called Laura Ingraham on Netflix. That was good. I liked that. I'm glad I picked that one. I'm glad I got to that one in the trending for the day. All right, I think that's about it. I think we're done. So those of you on Twitch, I discovered this great stream called the Dumb Stream here, and I think we're going to raid that because I think that they stream right after this show here. So if you're on Twitch right now, stick around, and we'll go in and raid this this stream that we totally don't know anything about. So stick around for that. But let's change the scene up here, and let's switch out the music, and let's go. So, thank you everybody who came by and chatted with us in the live chat here. It was a slow start off the morning, I will admit that, but you guys came in full force and we talked about Rittenhouse and a lot of stuff in here, and, well, our one friend came in high, so, well, I hope he enjoys it, because I have a CDL and I can't. We'll be back here tomorrow with more contemporary. We'll do something I'm thankful for, something that restores my faith in humanity. We'll talk about that at the end of the show here, and talk about more news headlines. We might have a verdict by then. We might know what's going on here, and we might either be completely white-pilled or completely black-pilled. Who knows? It'll depend on what the jury decides off of today here. So continue to watch back. Come back and hang out with us for that. I didn't see anything in the live chat saying guilty or not guilty yet. I'm sure that you guys would have cut in if we needed to do that. But we will see you here tomorrow with more contemporary. Until then, I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.